Reverse by Black K. Cat. Chapter 74. Cinerate. Shisui is never, ever going to disrespect a plant ever again because this one is kicking his butt and he is somehow far less optimistic about his chances to win than he was when Tenzo was conscious and kicking right next to him. With a sound of utter frustration, he heaves Tenzo higher up over his shoulder, thanks everything frankly benevolent that Tenzo is a beanpole and a FD and lets a shit sweep them out of the path of a spear of branches. Through the whirl of dispersing leaves and wind, there's just enough time to see another surge of choking vines, and Shisui curses, ducks, and leaps for the top of Kana'a's wall. From the mad tangle of greenery beneath them, there's a low, mocking laugh. Branches slide apart, and Zetsu grins up at them. Too many teeth and too much dark humor.
Come on down here, little hummingbird,
he taunts, and that smile is too wide and sharp for any human.
I'd be happy to take that burden off your hands, you know. We're going to need him in the near future, so I may as well take him now.
Damn! Shisui tightens his arms around Tenzo's waist, waiting to curse out loud. No wonder Zetsu had targeted Tenzo first, knocked him out barely 3 minutes into the fight, and then tried to drag him underground. Itachi had managed a fireball that drove him away, and Shisui had been able to grab their teammate before he got plant-napped. But Zetsu hasn't let up on his attempts. Now they're down to their most useful team member in this match, plus a possible hostage, and also plus a dead weight they can't afford to put down anywhere because Zetsu is crafty and spends far too much of his time merged with the ground. Shisui just hopes the other teams are having more luck than they are. There's not going to be a future for Akatsuki! He snaps, and it has to be true. This is a last stand kind of attack. Their weird statue is destroyed. Pain has been captured. How many Rebecca plans can they have, honestly? Zetsu laughs, eerie and wavering, and he doesn't seem at all bothered.
Maybe not,
he agrees, grinning.
But Akatsuki has never meant much of anything to me, I'll admit. Just a means to an end.
Well, Shisui wasn't exactly expecting him to come out and say it! But if this is a last-ditch kind of thing, it's not really that much of a surprise. Kurama's implied enough times that Akatsuki had a shadow leader, and Zetsu is slippery enough, has kept out of enough direct battles that Shisui's money has been on the plant guy being the leader for weeks now. It's another flash of movement, and Shisui is gone so fast he doesn't even have time to curse, flashing to the other side of the clearing, leaping through vine-choked trees, and ducking around a burst of dagger-tipped branches to land further down the wall. In the same moment, Itachi sweeps out of the trees, a dragon made of fire swirling around him, and the jutsu lunges for Zetsu without pause. Shisui moves as Zetsu turns, flips off the wall, and flashes through seals one-handed, then raises a hand to his lips and lets a flood of fire loose. Itachi is smart enough to dodge, and Shisui grabs for more chakra, clumsier this time, but just as fast, and a screaming wind hits the blaze and it roars, doubling in size and strength. Mid-air, Shisui triggers another Shunshin, landing lightly on the wall and braces himself for whatever comes out of the fire. The smoke is thick, blinding, and maybe that wasn't the best idea, but it's not like a clear battlefield is helping them fight anyway. Itachi! He calls just to make sure his stupid little cousin didn't do something inadvisable. Here! Itachi says, materializing beside him in a whirl of leaves. He has his tanto out, stained with sap and dripping white ichor from the few blows they've managed to make connect, but they're both running low on chakra, by now both battered. Nothing seems to stick to Zetsu. Shisui thinks wearily, trying to readjust Tenzo so he's not quite so off balance. The bastard just shakes off whatever hits they land and dodges the rest. Fuck! He mutters, catches the look Itachi gives him and rolls his eyes. Whatever, sorry to offend your delicate ears? I mean, fuck this shit! Itachi rolls his eyes right back, shaking the goop off his sword. Tenzo? He asks, casting a quick, worried look at the older boy. Probably a moderate concussion? Shisui admits, and it turns his stomach. Tenzo needs a medic, not to keep bouncing around on Shisui's shoulder like a sack of rice. But Zetsu's after him. They can't risk letting the bastard into the village, and they also can't put Tenzo down, because there's every chance Zetsu will just suck him into the ground and bolt! Itachi's face slides towards grimness, and he casts a careful look around them, Sharingan spinning. The Sharingan is just about the only reason they managed to keep up so far, honestly. Zetsu's more than capable of fighting on two fronts at once, and he doesn't seem to be holding back at all. The wall beneath them starts to rumble. Oh, screw you! Shisui yelps, throwing himself off the ledge and calling up a Shunshin that spins him across the clearing. He lands in the branches of a tree, Itachi a few seconds behind him, just as there's a groaning crack and the stone shatters, roots and creepers tearing it apart from the inside out. Somewhere in the shredding smoke, Zetsu laughs.
Come to think of it,
He says, that edge of vicious mockery still all too present in his tone.
I bet I could find a use for your eyes while I'm at it. You're a suspiciously little hummingbird. That's an interesting power you have, just like your grandfather's, isn't it?
Normally, Shisui is all too happy to jump on any mention of Kagami, but from this plant creature who's trying to take over the world? Yeah, pass. He'd much rather badger the Hokage for stories or his mother. Well, maybe not her. She's scarier than Sarutobi since she has access to baby pictures. And Tenzo. I could probably show Tenzo those baby pictures. God, now there's a nightmare. It's just slightly possible that Shisui's brain is way too talented at entertaining multiple unnecessary trains of thought at one time and in the middle of a crisis. It's a pretty terrible way to keep from panicking, honestly. Leave Kagami out of this! Shisui snaps, bristling. And you can have our eyes over my dead body! That's not happening! Behind him, a spark of corrupted rat sweet chakra, and Shisui spins already, knowing it's too late. He's going to be too slow. He catches that too wide grin, the light of victory in Zetsu's incandescent eyes as he splits out of the tree with grasping hands. A massive scaled sword crashes down between them, shearing off the bough Shisui is standing on, and the warp snatches him up as he falls. Shisui has a split second to register someplace that's wrenchingly other, full of darkness and echoing emptiness and square pillows rising from the gloom, and then he and Tenzo and Itachi are all spilling out of another twist of space, landing in a heap on top of a section of wall that's still standing. Reinforced shinobi sandals crunch over stone as a man in a white mask steps through the rubble. His studded Akatsuki cloak sweeps the ground, dropping from his shoulders as he moves to lie crumpled in the dust. And there's a gunbai in his hand, the long chain looped loosely around his wrist. The air of menace around him is practically a living thing, dark and heavy, and crushing Shisui's lungs like nothing has since he was a new academy student. With a gasp, he scrabbles for a handhold on the stone, finds Itachi's wrist, and drags his cousin and Tenzo with him as he retreats right up against the guard tower. Tellingly, Itachi doesn't even consider resisting. With a tearful tickle, Kisame slings his sword over his shoulder and leaps down from the stump of the limb he was standing on, landing heavily and then leaning back against a thrust of jagged stone like he hasn't a care in the world. You've all been having fun out there, huh? He says easily, grinning like it's all a grand joke, like he can't feel the killing intent that's turning the air to molten stone.
What's the meaning of this?
Zetsu demands sharply, pulling himself fully from the tree and leveling a glare at the masked shinobi.
Toby, what do you think you're doing? I had them!
Toby, Shisui thinks and feels a shiver trace down his spine. Kurama had said he played the fool no matter what, acted like the dumbest sort of clown, that they shouldn't let their guard down around him because it wasn't really like that, but one thing to hear that their opponent put on a mask. Even Shisui does that, honestly. Another thing entirely to see him like this, easily twice as threatening as Kurama ever managed to be, even after saving them.
Had them? For what?
Toby asks, and his voice is low and dark and threaded through with menace.
The Gedomazo is shattered. We need to find another way.
Zetsu bristles.
No, we need to fix it. The Gedomazo will work. The Eye of the Moon plan is all we need.
The white mask tips ever so faintly.
You've been a friend since the very first, Zetsu,
he says, deceptively mild, but Shisui can feel an incandescent, unearthly rage vibrating through each word, can read it in the set of the man's body.
Do you remember the first night I believed? Do you remember the moment when I agreed to help you no matter what?
There's a long pause as Zetsu studies Toby, eyes narrowing like he's looking for the trap in the words.
Of course I do,
he says, and the frustration and anger have been neatly buried, replaced with sympathy.
Such a tragedy what happened to that poor girl. But we can fix it. You know that, don't you? You remember what Madara planned to give this world its happy ending?
Toby scoffs, low and sharp.
I remember that you were the one to inform us that Kakashi and Rin were nearby,
he says, and Shisui goes still, horror and confusion building, because Kakashi and Rin makes him think of Team Minato, and Team Minato makes him think of the third member lost to the war, and Uchiha, a boy with wild dark hair who always had a smile to spare for Shisui, who babysat and worked and helped old ladies carry their groceries home. No! He thinks, desperate to be proven wrong, but his mind can't stop, is already cataloging movement and build and visible features. Obito!
I wish I had found them sooner,
Zetsu says, and he melts back into the tree, only to rise from the ground in front of the other man a moment later. The compassion in his voice sounds absolutely genuine, but Shisui can see the way Kasame's eyes narrow, how his grin doesn't waver as much as it does sharpen. Clearly, they hear something that he isn't familiar enough to pick out.
A few minutes earlier and we could have saved her.
There's a long pause, tense enough to leave Shisui breathless, and Toby reaches up. He splays a hand over his mask, reinforced gloves clicking against the porcelain, and then pulls it away. Obito, Shisui recognizes and has to swallow down his horror. Oh, gods! It really is him! Scarred and furious and cold, an expression on his face that the cheerful boy Shisui remembers would never have worn in 1,000 years!
Yes!
Obito agrees, and it rasps in his throat like the word is almost impossible to say. He lets the mask drop, clattering against the stone, and doesn't look after it as it rolls to a stop among the tangled vines.
We could have. But that wouldn't fit with your plan, would it have? If I saved Rin, there was no reason for me to remake the world. No reason to let Madara train me, groom me to take his place. No reason I should listen to you or play your games or abandon my village. And that just wouldn't do, would it?
The malice in the air redoubles, grows heavy enough to crush in an instant. Zetsu is still, wary, but not yet running, and Shisui only wishes he were that resilient. If he could stand, he would absolutely bolt for the nearest cover, but he doesn't think his knees would support him right now, let alone allow him to carry Tenzo and Itachi away with him. He wishes they would. He really wishes that they would. Zetsu's expression wavers for a long moment before it slides into a concerned frown.
Toby, did the Uzumaki brat start filling your head with lies? Maybe coming back to Konoha wasn't the best idea. That,
Obito says, as quiet as poison,
is not my name.
Across the field, Kisame laughs. Zetsu pauses, studying Obito carefully.
Madara,
he admits, like it's a meaningless concession, and that brings its own flicker of horror as Shisui tightens his grip on Itachi's wrist. Easy enough, again, to hear that Madara controlled Akatsuki, that the whole organization was a puppet he wielded, but people don't talk about Konoha's most famous missing nin, the Uchiha especially. Shisui can remember 3 times in his life he's heard that name out loud, and one of them was from Kurama. To connect that name with the boy 5 years Shisui's senior, his babysitter, makes Shisui's stomach turn. There's a long beat, like Obito is considering this, like he's weighing it as a choice, but then he keeps walking without either accepting or dismissing it.
You rarely left the cave while I was recovering,
he says, flat and inflectionless.
Why did you choose that moment to scout? Out of all the spaces for Kakashi and Rin to flee, why is it they ran right past the cave where Madara was keeping me? Even though a straight back to Konoha would have been smarter.
Tactical genius, always thinking 10 steps ahead, even when he has to come up with plans on the fly, was Kurama's grudging assessment of Toby before they attacked the Akatsuki base. Hard to connect with the clown Obito played, but easy enough to see it now in this man, laying all the pieces of the puzzle in order. Kurama must have given him the first piece, and now he's come to get all the others as well.
Do you really think I have all of these answers?
Zetsu asks, annoyed.
Sometimes things simply happen, like how we found you after the cave-in.
The ragged sound Obito makes isn't anywhere even close to a laugh.
Right! The cave-in! On a mission where we weren't supposed to encounter resistance. Where the E1N knew exactly who to kidnap, to make me come running straight into their trap. Which I shouldn't have survived in the first place, but which gave Madara the perfect excuse to carve me open and make me a better tool while he was...
He breaks off suddenly and sharply, like something forced him to, and makes a dark, furious sound of frustration. Zetsu takes one step back, then pulls himself up short.
Madara,
He says, the prelude to a warning. Obito laughs, mad and deadly and wrecked, and his fingers go tight around the Gunbai's chain.
Zit!
He growls.
Isn't my name either!
Space contorts him between two heartbeats. He's gone. In the same moment, Zetsu spins, clearly familiar with this tactic, and starts to sink like the earth has turned into quicksand. It's already too late, though. The ground rumbles, and even as Obito appears out of thin air with a Gunbai already in flight, Zetsu cries out, fighting vines and roots that try to hamper him. The fan end of the Gunbai slams into him, knocking him back and right off his feet, and Obito follows without hesitation, a flame of kunai bursting out of his other dimension like they've been propelled from a launcher! Have a second to get his feet under him again, and Zetsu spins with a snarl, one hand coming up with a lash of roots following. He twists around the kunai as if he's boneless, snaps a kick at Obito and dives for the ground. A ripple in the earth, he's gone, but the plants around them heave, suddenly surging with life. Obito dodges the first lunge, leaps over the second, phases through a spearing branch as thick around as Shisui's waist, and flickers through hand signs in a blur. One hand snaps up towards his mouth, echoing Shisui's earlier motion, but this isn't a stream of fire, it's a flood! Plants scorch, wood buckles, and in the midst of it, something screams! Zetsu lurches up from the rock behind Obito, branch-like fingers stabbing, and Obito cries out! Blood splatters the ground as he takes a stumbling step, hauling himself off the Mogutan that pierced him, and he collapses to one knee.
You ungrateful child!
Zetsu snarls.
This is your one chance to see that world you dream of! This is the only way to get her back, don't you realize that? The Eye of the Moon!
Obito laughs, wet and rasping, and wipes the blood from his lips.
Get her back!
He manages and bares his teeth in a death's head grin.
You never understood a single thing! I don't want her back! She was never mine to begin with!
In a surge of muscle and motion, he spins to his feet, yanking hard on the Gunbai's chain. It goes flying in a sweeping arc, the chain almost catching Zetsu before he dives into the ground, and Obito catches the fan, twists, and throws it again with all the force of his chakra behind it. A dragon made of wood slams into it in an explosion of chips, and Obito ghosts through the aftermath, whirls up and sends a barrage of shuriken whipping out of nowhere to slice through the grasping branches. He drops down through the aftermath, hits the ground, and slams a kunai straight into Zetsu's throat as the creature rises from the ground again. Shisui allows himself a moment to hope that that's a killing blow, like it would be for anyone else. It's also easy to remember the last time he and Tainzu fought Zetsu, though, the way the burning husks stood up and laughed at them, their complete and utter inability to kill him, and... Zetsu backhands Obito like he's a child, like he's not even worthy of the effort of a punch, and wrenches the kunai free. White ichor fills in the wound, smooths out into flesh, and Zetsu laughs, just like he did back then, high and cool and mocking.
Do you know what this is?
He asks, and it's the sound of someone delivering a fatal blow.
You're betraying us!
Of all the things Shisui expects, watching Obito crumble to the ground like a puppet with cut strings upon hearing those words isn't even vaguely among them. He's on his feet before he can think about the ramifications of it shaking off Itachi's hand. Below them, Zetsu laughs again, looming over Obito where he's on the ground, clutching at his heart and as white as snow.
You're vastly useful, Toby, even now,
Zetsu says, a patient parent addressing an unruly child.
Stop this idiocy and stop letting other people cloud your mind. I will end.
Shisui appears between them in a whirl of leaves, already driving forward with his Danzo in hand. The blade slams into Zetsu's chest with all the force and impact of an exploding tag, as much chakra as Shisui was able to gather behind it, and the plant man shrieks for half a second before he's gone in a burst of dirt. Great! Shisui mutters, but he doesn't hesitate to turn, dropping to one knee beside Obito and trying to see where he's hurt. His identity and Shisui's possible lingering affections for one of the few other expressive Uchiha aside, Obito has already landed several blows on Zetsu, which is more than Itachi, Tenzo, and Shisui together have managed. If they want to stop him, Obito surviving is their best bet. But Obito bats his hand aside before Shisui can pull his shirt away. He takes a painful breath that looks too short and shallow to do him any good. And his head falls back, eyes fluttering shut. His mouth moves as if he's trying to talk, but it's nothing Shisui can read on his lips, and the words don't come. Obito! Shisui says sharply, but there's no response. With a curse, he wrenches off a glove and presses his fingers to the unscarred side of Obito's throat, searching desperately for a pulse. Another upwarded breath, and on the exhale, Obito rasps.
Heart. Seal. Destroy.
His eyes close all the way, and his chest stills. No! A seal, Shisui thinks desperately. Some kind of seal triggered by Zetsu's words, definitely, but... Heart. His heart's stopped. So logically, it's on his heart. Destroying the heart will destroy the seal, but that won't help with the "we need him alive to kick Zetsu's butt for us" thing. And Shisui doesn't have time for this because... A blaze of fire at his back, blue-white with power and hot enough to burn even through his flak jacket and shirt. Zetsu recoils with a cry, vanishing into the greenery, and Itachi settles on the ground with a light thump, breathing slightly harder than normal, but determined. There's no chance to thank him, but Shisui doesn't need to. They've always watched each other's backs. Instead, he turns his attention to Obito, lets his mind skip across 10 different scenarios and discards them all, but... Kurama mentioned Tobi could heal for most things. A destroyed heart was definitely never mentioned, but it's not like Shisui has a lot of other options right now, and it's not like it will make Obito any more dead than he is right now. Maybe this will work, and maybe it won't, but it's their only chance short of translocating a Biju. One of the Biju who are obviously busy fighting, going by the chakra flaring around Ghana, to actually kick Zetsu's everything right out of existence. Shisui really hopes that the whole enemy of my enemy thing doesn't turn around and bite them in the butt, but Obito said, abandon my village when he was facing Zetsu. Maybe it's not anything even vaguely close to repentance, but it's something, Shisui thinks. He reaches down to grab his sword again, flicks the ichor off of it, and calls up his chakra. It burns green-white in the air, condensing, brightening as he channels it into the blade. It's not Kakashi's Chidori, not even close, but it's a trick that just blew a massive hole in Zetsu's chest, and with any luck, it will be enough. Shisui flips it up, grabs the hilt, and slams the blade down as hard as he can, just as a surge of water sweeps around and past him. There's no time to look to make sure that Kasame is going for Zetsu and not Itachi, and Shisui doesn't try, even though the urge is almost impossible to resist. Instead, he braces himself for detonation, narrows the blaze of chakra into as tight a lance as possible, and stabs Obito in the heart. For a long moment, there's nothing at all. No light, not even darkness, just emptiness. And it's the most terrifying thing he's ever felt. Really? A voice says close to his ear, though he can't see anyone, can't feel the whisper of anyone's breath or hear any sound of movement. She sounds disappointed, though. Angry, and he knows he deserves every last bit of her hate, but he's never really thought he would have to face it in person.
I'm sorry,
he whispers. It's one of the first things he's said in years that hasn't been a lie. I know you are, she tells him, sad but steady. She always was the strongest of the three of them. But sometimes sorry isn't enough. His throat burns. His eyes are hot. It's been so long since he felt the need to cry, like the heat of the rage inside him dried up every last tear.
I don't know what else I can offer,
he tells her.
I'm dead.
He knows that if he could see her, there would be that twist to her mouth again, the one she always wore when he'd done something more stupid than she expected. It hurts, not being able to see it, but that wound is 7 years old now, and the edges have scabbed over, even though he's never done anything to help them heal. The nothingness shivers, and green-white light reverberates through it like the ripples of sound from a struck gong. Enough for you to end up here, she agrees, voice firm, but not enough to stay. That doesn't seem fair, doesn't seem right, and he opens his mouth, so say as much. But before he can, there's a palm over his lips. Even if he can't see her, he doesn't need to in order to know she's giving him that same determined glare she always wore so well. Don't be an idiot, she says fiercely. Don't you dare. I didn't die so you could unmake the world. I died to protect it. You killed our family. And I don't know how I'm supposed to forgive you for that. He's never expected forgiveness, but hearing it straight out like that still twinges. Gently, carefully, he reaches up, closing his fingers around a child's thin wrist, and really, how painful to think now about what could have been, what might have happened if the world was kinder.
You wanted to see peace,
he said, and it's not any sort of defense or explanation, but it's a thought, an idea buried so completely so long ago, but he remembers now. I did, she agrees, sad and quiet. But no war for peace will ever accomplish anything. I thought you of all people would understand that. Maybe he did once, but it got lost somewhere along the way, buried under the hate and rage.
They killed you,
he said, and it feels like breaking.
They killed you because of me.
I killed myself, she tells him, as brutally honest as always. It was my choice. You have to respect that. It hurts, he wants to say, but he remembers that image of her beneath the bloated moon, blood on her lips and a hole in her chest. She'd been scared, and he'd seen the image of her terrified eyes reflected in his dreams each night, but she'd been brave too, so achingly, horrifically, beautifully brave, and somewhere along the line he'd forgotten that about her. Her bravery was always one of the things he loved about her best.
I did it,
he admits on a breath, and he folds down, pressing his forehead to her thin shoulder as her arms come up to wrap around his head. I know, she says into his messy hair, and this at least is warmer. You've always had a habit of forgetting the important things when you get angry. That green-white light flares again, brighter than before, and he can feel her sigh against his cheek for the last time. I can't forgive you, she tells him again. But keep trying. Keep trying, all right? Don't stop until the moment you end up here again. I'll be waiting, and we'll talk again. Obito takes a breath that smells of her, feels the cotton of her dress beneath his cheek, the soft brush of her brown hair.
All right,
he agrees, and this is one promise he'll definitely keep. Good, Rin whispers in his ear, and she kisses him on the cheek and hurls him back into his body as his heart restarts with a blazing, shuddering beat.